Welcome everyone to today's episode. So after you learn Java, you want to learn how to create web applications, and the best thing to do that is Spring Boot. Today I will show you how to use Spring Boot in 10 minutes without any complications, so you can easily get started and working on your web application. So the first thing that you want to do is you go to this website, and it's Spring Initializer, which will basically help you set up your project, which you can then open in IntelliJ or Eclipse and get started immediately and working on your code. I will be using Maven, but you can use Gradle if you want to. Maven is like pip in Python or Node Package Manager in JavaScript or in Node, and language will be Java. Spring Boot version is not really that important, but let's just keep it at default. Group, let's add JCC. You can add any name you want, and here you can also add anything you want. I'll just call it tutorial. Description, Spring Boot tutorial. Let's keep this as it is. We'll package it as a jar, and I will use Java 11. You can use Java 17, 8, or whatever you want. The next most important thing to do is you need to add dependencies, and that's the reason why we're using Maven. So you click Add Dependencies, and for now we'll just add Spring Web, and as you can see here we can build web including RESTful applications using Spring Model View Controller. And it uses Tomcat as the default embedded container. So for now we'll just add this, but as you learn Spring you will of course add many of these dependencies here, which will help you speed up your process. So let's just click Generate and Save File. Now that you have that file installed, we'll just open it as a project. Let's go to the next step. Great, now that we have our project, we just need to open it in an IDE. I will be using IntelliJ, but you can use any IDE you prefer. So let's extract this file you just downloaded. Extract here. You can delete the zip and go inside. You copy this path in which this project is, and you just go to your IntelliJ or Eclipse, new project, Java, next, and project location. You just paste the thing which we just copied and click Finish. Once you open the project, you will see that the IntelliJ will recognize that we're using Maven, and IntelliJ and Maven will automatically download all the artifacts that we need in order for our project to run. And as you can see, the Maven is doing its thing, and when you go here, external libraries, you can see your Java version, and you will see that when Maven is done, and it's now, that we got a bunch of things that we'll need in order to create our application. So if you go to POM XML, you can see that we have our dependencies here, which we added in the Spring Boot initializer, like Spring Boot Starter Web and some other dependencies. And if you go to source, main, Java, and here, this is the starting point of our application. And if you go to resources and application properties, this is where you set the properties for your application. And now that you know where everything is, we can start writing the code in under 3 minutes, which makes Spring Boot very, very, very good. And to show you what we have done now, if you go to your main application and you go right click and run, you'll actually see that we have a working server. The server doesn't do anything because it cannot accept GET or POST requests yet, but it's a running server on some port, as you will see right now. You can see that the application was started in 6 seconds and that we have our HTTP server on port 8080, which is a great thing, but it doesn't do anything, and that's the next step. And now we need to tell our Spring Boot application what do you do when user visits a certain site. In order to do that, we need to create a controller. So you go to right click to your package, Java class, and you can call it anything you want. I'll call it hello controller because we'll display a hello world message. And now you need to tell Spring that this is a REST controller. And now when this is a REST controller, we can create a method which will be called when the user visits a certain site. Let's make that method public. We'll return a string. I'll call it hello, and it will return hello world. But it still doesn't do anything because we need to tell Spring when to call this method. Okay, now we know that we'll call it when user visits a certain site, and now we tell it which site. So you say add request mapping, and in here goes the path. And you can also specify a method, like method equals request method dot delete or request method dot post, but the default method is get, so we'll leave it as it is. And now when you run your application on the default localhost 88/, you should get this message. Let's now run the application and see how it works. And you can now visit your application at localhost 8080, and you can see that we have our hello world message. And I want to congratulate you on this step, because this is the first step of you learning your web application programming. This is basically how every major application is getting created. But instead of sending a string, we send an HTML document and CSS files and so on to create a beautiful website. Let's say that we want to go to another location and do something else. So public string and hello user, maybe something like this. And we want to return hello user. You can just say that this is a request mapping on path hello. Save this, rerun the application, and let's test it again. So now we are at our localhost 8080, and when we refresh we get hello world, but what happens if we go to /hello? We can see that the string has changed and it says hello user. And basically this is the root of every major application. Like this, you can also handle get and post and delete methods. Let's say that you want to have a web form. In that case, you would be using request mapping on some location, let's say location, and you would say method is request method dot post. And now you can capture user input, process it, save it to a database, and return it to the user. But we'll leave that for another video. Okay, so our application is running, and what happens if we decide to go to something like hello world? You will see that we'll get an error because our application only knows how to handle / and the /hello. So that's another thing to know, that the user can only visit the sites for which you put the request mapping and make a function that does something. So if we go back to hello, we get hello user, and if we go to the root, we get hello world, which is basically what we put here. And another thing that I want to show you is, since we're using a model view controller design pattern, I want to show you what everything is. So our class is a controller, so this is our controller because it controls what we do on the website. Our model is the data that we send, which is in this case hello world, and in this case hello user. And our view is basically when you send the model to a web browser, the web browser creates the view. So what we usually do is we send our model, which is our application data, to a template view. We fill that data in, and then we send it to the web browser, which then displays the view. So our class is our controller, our data is our model, and then we send that model to a view and we generate a view in the web browser. And now we know how to create web servers and websites with Spring Boot using Spring Web, which uses Spring Model View Controller.